Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I know. Hey, Julie, how are you? I think we met many years ago.
How are you?
It was not until
Just Nathan. Nice to meet you. Hello, Julia. Hello. How are you? Good. Yourself? Cameron. Hey, Cameron. I'm Uncle John.
I think you met him a long time ago.
he came because of his wedding.
Okay. Extremely proud of you.
Yeah, we were there for.
Stefan, how's it going?
How are you?
Good. Good. Your work is going well?
It's going.
Oh, family time.
We'll have time and small modification.
Yeah, I met, when I was working at the pool, I met Alice and Carly at the pool area.
Yes, yeah, I know. I see them around.
I do, and seeing I work at all the different venues.
We're glad that I'm
Facility starting soon. We saw the big room and like set aside there upstairs.
I lost a few last
You were saying? There's photographs of the two parents.
Very much younger.
More hair up top and no hair on the face. Right? I was told it's your mom. Yeah. But your mom's going to show you.
very specific.
But it's still
The Denno side apparently is strong.
To be honest, I have a few things to say, but I just want to really let it happen once they're very clean. It's also not my show. But I just want to run as best as I can.
That's right. Yeah, they were all.
wanted to take care of before I made my way out here. That's how I came to this guy
Yes, yes it can. I'll make sure it's high enough so it's that one?
right, we're just going to begin in a moment or so. So if you could find your seat, that would be great. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Paul Olson. I'm one of the pastors here in the Lower Mainland and was asked to come and just sort of lead us through this service in remembrance of Joyce. And so we're glad that you're here, glad that you're able to participate. We have a number of people that are going to share, and so we're looking forward to that as well. I just have just a moment where I just want to pray, and then I'm just going to read the psalm that is listed in your program, Psalm 23, which was one of her favorite passages of the Bible. But let me open in a word of prayer first. God, thank you that this day is a day that you have made. And Lord, as we're here, we ask that you would help us in our grief. As we come to the realization of this loss of this amazing lady, that, Father, we are needing your comfort. And your word tells us that blessed are those that mourn, for they will be comforted. And so we're grateful that you are here. And God, I just pray that no matter where people are at in their own spiritual journey, or if they even have one, God, we just ask that you would just be here and help us as we walk through this together, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Psalm 23 is a very popular psalm, and it is one that really has brings a lot of comfort. And it says this, and yours is a little bit of an older version in the program. I'm going to read more of a current version. It says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures, and he leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Joyce had a faith in God. And as she went through life, as you got to read some of her story, in that many years, 96 years, there's a lot that she got to experience. Not all of it was good. Not all of it was easy. Not all of it was things that she would have wanted for herself. But it's interesting, as she journeyed through that, she always held on to her faith. And one of the hymns that she asked for was this song called "My Anchor Holds." Because the anchor is what's needed in the times of storms. It helps you from overturning. It helps you from causing a wreck. It helps you in the midst of those tumultuous times to hold fast, to be at peace, and to be calm. And so we're just going to play this. And the words are there. When you came in, you were given the words. You can sing if you'd like, or you could just meditate on the words as they are shared. Let's listen together. We have a number of family members that want to come and to share some memories. And so we're going to turn it over to them at this time and look forward to what they have to share with us.
Well, thank you, Pastor. That's very nice, and thank you everybody for coming. Can you hear me?
Wait, Philip, maybe we'll turn it down a bit.
Thank you. It's one of the curses of being short. I was I was recently in the Rockies on vacation, and I went up to Lake Louise, which is where I spent a lot of my youth, because my mother worked up at the hotel when I was growing up, and so we would travel up there on the weekends from Calgary, and it was nice to travel those trails again, even though she couldn't be there. But one of the trips that I did when I was in the Rockies was up to the Burgess Shale, and that's a fossil site, and it's a guided hike by the Parks Canada. And on the hike was this family from Princeton, New Jersey. There was 4 of them, and they had a son and a daughter. And the daughter was about 8 years old. And, we hiked up there, and we spent an hour in the fossil bed, and it was very interesting. And, Eleanor, that was her name, was very talkative. And she got along with the guide, who was named Amy, very, very well. And anyway, on the way down, Eleanor was behind her father, and she was a very excitable child, and she got too close, and his trekking pole came up and hit her in the face. And she started to cry and everything, and the guide said to her, well, Eleanor, life is all about having experiences. Some of them are good, like going up to the fossil bed and seeing fossils from 500 million years ago. And some of them are bad, like getting hit in the face with a trekking pole. And my mother, she lived for 96 years, and life has a tendency to hit you in the face quite a bit. And she had that on many occasions. And when I think of my mother's life, I think of how lucky she was. Lucky in the sense of living to 96, which, let's face it, a lot of us won't see 96. We can hope, but a lot of us probably won't. And the second thing is that she lived for 93 and a half of those years in very good health, both physical and mental. And when you live for that long, 2 things happen. The first thing is that you see a lot of history-changing events, and the second thing that happens is you outlive pretty much everybody that you've ever known in life. And she always had the attitude that like her religious faith would always be not so much out front in everybody. She never tried to convert anybody. But she had a deep belief in the fact that she was going to see the people who mattered to her in the next world, which was, an incredibly comforting thought for her and for anybody, I suspect. She was born 8 months before the stock market crash that set off the Great Depression. She grew up in rural Nova Scotia in what she herself claimed was kind of an idyllic childhood. And she would often say that they grew up poor, but they didn't know it. And, the family had 10 children. She had 9 siblings. So as you can imagine, her parents were very tired most of the time. And, storytelling was always a big part of their life. My Uncle Noel his favorite saying was always, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And, and they could tell great stories. I mean, I remember listening to Noel and my other Uncle Warren, who used to talk about all of their trips to the Arctic on container ships. And for those of you who know me, I have a very deep interest in the polar regions. So those would always be stories that I would listen to intently. After graduation from high school, she trained as a teacher, and she taught in what were then one-room schoolhouses in both Nova Scotia and in Quebec. And in Quebec is where she met my father, Raymond, and they were married in 1953 at the house in Nova Scotia. Now, my father didn't turn out to be a very good husband or a very good father. And, as time went on, and children arrived, he tended to get worse. I'm often reminded of this biblical saying that the sins of the father are visited on the sons. Raymond didn't have a very good relationship with his father. And so, like, that kind of percolated over into our family. Anyway, for the first few years, they lived in Montreal, and my mother worked outside the house. She always talked about her job at the Royal Trust in Montreal. And then, as the children came and we moved to Toronto, she no longer worked outside the home. And, the family situation was not good. And we ended up in public housing in Ontario. And, there were lots of challenges associated with that. Like, in order to provide for the family, she had to go to rescue missions and to food banks. And, they were very tough years. Now, I don't want to, I don't want to paint all of the years on Blake Street as being bad, because they weren't. There were good times. Some of them that I remember were going up to Wasaga Beach with the family. And if you know anything about cars in the 1970s, you know that they were very, very long. And my father had a very, very long station wagon, blue station wagon, that we used to drive up there. And there were also good times. Well, I don't know if looking back on it, but I never had any new clothes as a child, because everything came from a rescue mission. So there are photos of me as a child, which are, I don't know if you say embarrassing, but different. And Allison, who is my sister, she used to cut her hair. And let's just say that it's a good thing that she didn't go into barber, because the haircuts weren't very good. Like usually one side was longer than the other. And so, there are pictures of me as a child, and fashion in the 1970s had two very big things. The one was bell-bottom pants, and the other was shirts with very large collars. And so there are pictures of me with a shirt that's way too big, with a collar that sticks out almost to my shoulder blades, and my hair is longer on one side than on the other. So she always thought that those, like I would say, oh, no, these are really embarrassing photos. I don't want them seen. And she would always say, oh, you look so cute in them, right? So. Anyway, like Peter, who was my older brother, Raymond had a relationship with his sons, which was very similar to what he had with his father. And so Peter ended up running away. And it was almost a year later before they found him, and he had moved to Vancouver. And so, after 25 years of marriage, and my mother always talked about how her self-esteem was very low during the marriage years, that that she had blamed herself for the family situation. And but in 1977, she made the decision to leave my father, which couldn't have been easy, because we didn't have anything, and she still had 3 boys, young boys, who were in her care. But anyway, we left, and we went from Toronto to Vancouver, and I still to this day remember remember that flight. Since then I've taken many flights, but the only one I really remember was that one. And we landed in Vancouver, and Peter picked us up, and we stayed at the hostel down on Jericho Beach, which isn't there anymore. And I remember that the hostel had this policy that you had to be out from 8 to 4 in the afternoon. And so, we would just wander around town. And, I thought it was a great adventure at the time, but, I can't imagine what the stress level of my mother was. Anyway, over time we moved in with Peter, and they were kind of like good years and bad years. I remember one house that we moved into was up on Rupert and 28th, and when we went to see the house, it was actually occupied by a bunch of bikers, and they were sitting on the porch as we came in. And they had a German Shepherd dog, and the dog's name was Satan. And the biker who was holding it, he looked like he had been on like a 10-day bender, right? Like he was like barely conscious. And at that time, I was very frightened of dogs. I was like really scared of dogs. And so as I walked up the path, the Satan must have sensed that I was very afraid. And he lunged at me, and he grabbed me by the shoulder, and so sort of like I rolled, and I remember that, like, because I had on a big winter coat, that his teeth marks had gone through the winter coat and then into the jacket, and they had made an indentation in my arm, but they hadn't actually gone through. And so that was one house that we lived in, and we also lived in a place up by Kootenay Loop. But after a year, it became kind of untenable to stay. Mostly because Peter's lifestyle, like he was into drugs and things, and so my mother again, decided to reinvent herself, and she decided that we were going to move to Calgary. And so we did, and she began working up at the Chateau Lake Louise in the housekeeping department. And leaving 3 teenage boys on their own is probably not the best situation that you want to be in. But it was the best that we could do. And, we all got into trouble in our own ways, right? Like, my own trouble was that I started smoking when I was 11, and I started sniffing glue out of a sandwich bag to get high and stuff. And, John and David have similar stories of all the crazy things that we did back then. But, like, I remember those years as being some of the happiest, right? Because of the fact that that I used to be able to go up to the chateau and stay with her. And one of the things was like back in the 80s, the employee residences were actually in these hunting lodges that were down by the lake, and they were really, 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 really beautiful. And then the highlight of those weekends was always that we got to eat in the employee cafeteria, which was called the Bean, which was like a huge treat for me. And then hiking the trails and everything was always good. And then after, say, 7 or 8 years of that, everybody had left home, and my mother decided to go back out to Vancouver again. So she ended up in Vancouver, and she had to take like when she was at Lake Louise, she had worked herself up to supervisor of housekeeping for the hotel. And then, when she came back to Vancouver, she sort of had to start at the beginning again. And so she took jobs doing chambermaiding at the Weston Bay Shore and at the Hotel Vancouver. But she found those very physically demanding. And, then I left to go back to university. And, those were kind of like lonely years for my mother, as everybody had left home, and, she didn't have the responsibilities that she had before. But eventually she found the job that she liked the most, which was working at Duke Energy on the executive floor. And that's where she worked until she retired. Now, retirement was probably the second happiest time of my mother's life. Because when she was married to Raymond, she had very low self-esteem, and she cut herself off from her family. Which I think was very hard. And in retirement, she was able to reconnect with those people again. And so she would go down to Nova Scotia for 3 months every year. And she lived with her sister Barbara, and they would go around to all the friends and family that they had known. And the funny thing was the first time that she went, and it's not possible to do anymore because Greyhound doesn't run anymore, but she took the Greyhound bus from Vancouver to Halifax. Now, that takes 5 days. And I know from personal experience, because I've taken the bus from Calgary to Toronto many, many times. It's a very, very unpleasant experience. And so when she arrived in Halifax, her family said, took one look at her and said, well, you can't go back by bus. So they bought her a plane ticket. And then every other year that she went down, she flew. Now, she also, in her retirement, she took what she always described as the trips of a lifetime. And the first one was when I took her to the UK in 2002, and we went through, we took a bus tour from London up to Scotland, across to Ireland, and then back through Wales. And we were in Westminster Abbey. And if you've ever been in the Abbey, they have historical people buried under the building. And all of their markers are on the floor. And so she told me this story, and I've looked it up. I can't find any evidence that it's actually true, but it sounds good. Which is when Winston Churchill was nearing the end of his life, the government wanted to honor him for all of his wartime contributions. And so they asked him, do you want to be buried in the Abbey? And Churchill's response was, no. And his reason was that he didn't want to spend eternity having people walk over him. So, we went to Buckingham Palace. We went to Kensington Palace. This was just after Diana had died. And, my mother was always interested in history. And you could see that going to these places and seeing these things, it would really light up in her mind. And then the second trip that we took was to Antarctica, which, if you know me, I've been there 3 times. It's I'd probably move there if I could figure out how to get groceries and whatnot. But it was really it was really a great time. And the highlight was probably going to South Georgia to visit Shackleton's grave, and and also seeing Elephant Island and all of the historical places where she had read about. And sorry. Yeah. There's also, when you go to Antarctica, you have to cross a body of water called the Drake Passage, which is about 800 miles between South America and the Antarctic Peninsula. And it has 2 names. So sometimes it's called the Drake Shake, because the waves can get very high and the boat shakes. Or it can be called the Drake Lake, meaning that it's very calm and you don't have any problems. And unfortunately, when we went there, we got the Drake Shake. And so she and I spent 2 days very seasick in bed as we came back across the Drake Passage. You can see in the photo that she's smiling a lot when we're at Shackleton's grave, but we weren't smiling for those 2 days across the Drake Passage, that's for sure. My mother also read a lot. She loved to read. And as I mentioned, her favorite topic was always history. And after I became kind of obsessed with polar history, she did as well. And I have many memories of carrying huge knapsacks full of books from the library back to her place, because she would read them all. And she liked to read about stories that were in what's known as the heroic age of polar exploration. And the heroic age basically is from 1901 to 1912, and was the race to see who could get to the first pole, the first to get to the South Pole. And the race was between a man named Amundsen, who was in Norway, Captain Scott, who was British, and Ernest Shackleton, who was also British. And Amundsen won the race, but he's less well known than the other 2, even though their expeditions ended in disaster. And I think that those stories appealed to her because they were always stories about overcoming great hardship, and also that you had to sacrifice for something more than yourself. I have several examples. So in 1907, Shackleton made it to within 88 kilometers of the South Pole. And he decided to turn around in order to, because he thought if he went to the South Pole and back, he'd die on the way back. And when he got back to London, he explained to his wife his reasoning for why he made that decision. And I'll just put on my glasses so I can read it so I get it correct. He said, "I thought, dear, that you would rather have a live ass than a dead lion." And, there was also another story called The Worst Journey in the World. And this occurred in 1911, in July of 1911, which is the height of the Antarctic winter and part of Captain Scott's crew, there was a biologist named Bill Wilson, and he wanted to collect emperor penguin eggs from their nest. Now, if you know anything about emperor penguins, they nest in the winter, in the height of the winter. And so from their winter quarters, which was Cape Evans, to Cape Crozier, which is where the penguin colony was about 80 miles. And so three of them set off, Bill Wilson, Henry Bowers, and Apsley Cherry Gerard. And they describe conditions that are really, really tough. Cold that would go down to minus 80 with the wind chill, and hurricane-force katabatic winds. And, at one point in the story, his the tent blows away, and they're lucky to find it again. But in the end, they made it to the colony, and they got the eggs, and they made it back. And these kinds of stories would always fire her imagination. And then in January 1912, Scott made it to the South Pole, only to discover that Amundsen had been there a month earlier. And Scott records in his journal his feelings about this. And he says, and I quote, "Great God, this is an awful place, and terrible enough for us to have labored to it without the reward of priority." Now, Scott and his four companions then had to make the 800-mile journey back to McMurdo Sound to safety. And they didn't make it. And during the journey back, there was and Scott describes this in his journal quite vividly. Captain Oates, who was the pony handler on the expedition, he had been suffering from severely frostbitten feet for several weeks, and knowing that his companions weren't going to leave him, he got up one morning and he said, "I'm just going outside the tent. I may be quite some time." And then, of course, his companions never saw him. And that kind of story of sacrifice really appealed to my mother. She would often talk of that particular story. Anyway, his sacrifice was not enough, and Scott and his other two companions died a week later, basically 11 miles from safety. And then the last story that is more famous and well known is the Endurance Expedition, which was Shackleton's last big attempt. It was the Transantarctic Expedition to cross the continent. And of course, it was a dismal failure. The ship was caught in the ice and was crushed. And they spent 16 months on the ice before they reached Elephant Island. And then it was an 800-mile boat journey across the open sea. And when they landed on the island, they landed on the wrong side, so then they had to cross the island, the interior. And, when we were in Antarctica, we went to a lot of these places. And, my mother really, really, she loved history. And to experience it firsthand was a real highlight. But there was also tragedy in her life after retirement. And there were three in particular. So the first was the death of her sister Doris during a mugging in New York. And then the second was when Allison was diagnosed with cancer during her final pregnancy. I won't go into all the gory details of what occurred, but suffice it to say that these were very stressful times for everybody who was there. And I'm always grateful for all the help that was given by family friends like Iris and the people at her church, and the teachers that worked with Allison. And then the final one was Peter. He had lived a lot of his life, abusing drugs and alcohol, and he had cleaned himself up a lot, but he was never able to shake all of his demons, and he died of liver failure. My mother also was capable of maintaining very long friendships. And then the one that comes to mind is the one with Ann Whitcomb. She had met Mrs. Whitcomb was a social worker that she had met in the 1960s. And even though they saw each other very little over the next 40 years, they always remained friends and in contact up until Anne's death in the early 2000s. And their life paralleled each other in many ways. Anne had 3 children, a daughter and 2 sons. The oldest son was named Peter, and he had also gotten into drugs, and he died tragically at a young age. And her youngest son was named Eric, and he was my age. And I remember vividly coming home in Calgary, and there would be a box from Mrs. Whitcomb, and she would send my mother all the clothes that Eric had outgrown. And I've never met Eric Whitcomb, but he and I have shared a lot of clothes. And one of the nicest ones that I ever had was he had a jean jacket that he sent me, and I loved this jean jacket. And she used to write to Mrs. Whitcomb saying that I would hardly take it off, that I would sleep in it. So. I would like to end by just giving some funny anecdotes of my mother. After Allison's death, I took a job in Halifax at the National Research Council, and my mother went down to Nova Scotia to spend the summer, and she came into Halifax to visit me. And one day I took her to Point Pleasant Park, which if you've been in Halifax, is kind of like the Stanley Park of Halifax. And so we were walking up this trail, and the trail was a bit uphill. And I don't remember what I was doing, but all of a sudden she yelled, "Bear!" And I looked up the trail, and there was this woman coming over the top walking a Great Dane. And so I said to her, you should calm down. And when we were in Antarctica, when we went to visit Shackleton's grave, it's about a 10-minute walk from the whaling station out to the point where Shackleton's grave is. And on those islands, they grow a lot of tussock grass, which is very thick and very tall. And the fur seals like to crawl in there and sleep. Now, the males are very large, so you don't have any problem spotting them. And they're also very slow on land. But the females and the juveniles are much smaller, and they're quite agile. And so they tell you before you get off the boat, the fur seals might chase you. So don't run. Just stand there and make yourself big and maybe make some noise. So we walk out to Shackleton's grave, and we take photos and everything, and then we're walking back, and I'm in front. And all of a sudden, and my mother is 81 years old at this point, and all of a sudden I see her jog past me. And so I look back, and there's this fur seal sticking out of the tussock grass, and he's growling at her. And I said, "Mom, don't run." And she never looked back. And when I was a teenager in Calgary, I used to watch a lot of hockey. Well, I still watch a lot of hockey, but not nearly as much as I used to. And my mother didn't have any interest in sports. She didn't really understand sports. And so I forget what game was on, but I asked her, I said, "Well, which team do you like?" And she thought about it for a while, and she said, "Oh, the ones in blue," which turned out to be the Rangers. And I said, "Well, why did you choose the Rangers?" And she said, "I like their uniforms." So that was her definition of why she liked of how she chose the team that she was going to root for. And the last one was my mother worried about everything, and she had the ability in her mind to blow things out of proportion. So she would, like sometimes she would call me up and she would say, "Oh, I called so-and-so, and they didn't answer." And then in her mind, she could blow it up into some sort of medical emergency, right? Like, oh, maybe they're ill or something happened to them or whatever. And so after a while, I just kind of, jokingly, I just, every time she would call me or ask me this, I would say, "Well, maybe they're dead." And so then every conversation that I had with her, where she would say, "Oh, I called such and such and they didn't answer," and I said, "Well, maybe they're dead." And she would kind of smile with a wry smile, but that was just her personality. And perhaps one of my favorite jokes occurred after she lost her memory. I used to go down to see her twice a week on Wednesday and on Sunday. And I used to joke with her that, the one good thing about having a bad memory is that you can't remember you have a bad memory. And, the funny thing was that the joke never got old. I told it to her like 100 times. But she still had a sense of humor. I mean, one of the funny things when she lost her memory was, she would be watching TV and she would see Trump come on television, and then she would say, "Oh, that's Trump. What's he doing now?" And you would say, "Well, Mom, he's the president of the United States." And she would say, "Oh," and then she'd go quiet, and then. An hour later, Trump would come on TV again, and she'd say, "Oh, that's Trump. What's he doing now?" And then you'd say, "Oh, Mom, he's the president of the United States." And, I kind of got jealous, right? Like, there are many days that I want to forget that Trump is president of the United States. So, my mother's life was it was marked by kindness and sacrifice for others. You know, she was literally incapable of acting selfishly. You know, one trait that she had was that she would never ask for anything directly. You know, like she would always say, when he came down, she would say, "Oh, do you want a cookie?" And you would say, "Oh, well, do you want a cookie?" And then she would say, "Well, only if you're going to get one. You can get one for me." You know, and it was endearing, but it was indicative of her personality. You know, she didn't have the ability to act selfishly because she had never done it in her life. You know, I'm reminded of the saying, "Lord, give me the ability to change the things that I can change, the tolerance to accept the things that I cannot, and then the wisdom to know the difference." You know, my mother knew the difference. She had a lot of challenges, a lot of tragedy in her life, but she also had a lot of joy. And she never became bitter. She never expressed any regrets about her life. You know, as I said, she had a deep faith in God. She believed that she was going to be reunited. And that's an incredibly comforting thought. You know, I personally don't believe it myself. But when it's my time, and if I'm wrong, I'm going to be very pleasantly surprised. You know, my mother was a very unique person. And she gave us gifts that are probably the greatest that you can give to your children. And that is a love of learning and a love of reading and the ability to empathize and to forgive. You know, after Allison's death, I was very angry about a lot of things. But my mother never expressed any anger. And it was through her example that I was able to let go. I'm going to miss her.
Yeah, the things that Philip was saying there at the end about Mrs. Whitcomb, I remember. Yeah, those were highlights, like getting those clothing, you know, and then the other thought about Mama grew up poor and we grew up poor, but I didn't really feel that way, you know. Everything seemed just fine with me. I'm just going to say a few things here. Oh, how does this thing work? There we go. Yeah, so we got Mama, we got Grandma, we got Great Grandma, and a good friend. One of the really big memories I have of Mama is I was under the age of 10. I think I hurt my fingers on one of those, you know, those a door, you know the door that went up in the Blake Street underground, you know. I got my finger stuck in there, so I was off school for a bit. And so we'd sit down on the sofa, and we'd read Hardy Boy books. Maybe Nancy Drew too. I don't know, but Hardy Boy for sure. So the things, I guess I've had about a month now since Mama's been gone to think, and I sort of think, I don't really think that she's gone, even though she is gone. I can't touch her, can't talk to her, right? But there's three things I want to sort of focus on that are to me qualities or traits. The first one is a positive, and that's thriftiness. She was, because I guess growing up poor, maybe it was a natural inclination to go that way. But I guess I've kind of latched on to that. And it has rewards in that when you do get something, you're really happy, right? So that's one quality that she's kind of given to me. And the other one is a kind of an opposite. This one I was really sort of came along to me through my life and having kids and that, and that's bitterness. She, like all of us, she's human. She got angry and things like this, right? But yeah, she didn't allow herself to become bitter. And she told me this like probably in the last 10 years anyway. So yeah, she was helpful to me in times when I could have become bitter, right? So that's the second one, and that's a really huge one. And the last one is Mama had a different view on success. Success to her seemed to be more monetary. But when I think of how her life has gone, what I know of and hear of in that, she was actually very successful. Everybody here can attest to that, right? So that's where I'm at in this way. But I want to end it with a little funny one. When I was there was only one time in my life that I remember my mother using a bad word, and I was 11. We were in Calgary. David, Philip. We left our house near Center Street, 35th Avenue, and this memory is so vivid. There's all this traffic, so we have to jaywalk across Center Street, and the bus is coming, I guess, and so Mama's in charge, and even though we're hearing all the traffic and we're meandering out to that 4-lane road, all I remember coming out of her mouth is, when we're in the middle of it trying to navigate, is, "Oh shit." So that was the only time that Mama actually, to my knowledge, used a bad word. So, but it's funny how memories, and like when Philip was talking and other people talk, it's funny how memories will be dormant for so long, and then maybe somebody says something, or you smell something or hear something, and it just brings it back. So, but yeah, good memories of Mama, and yeah, I'll miss her, but She's very good. Thanks.
Well, Jonathan, I can attest to the fact that Mama used the word shit a lot. It was her favorite of the bad words. I'm here to say a few words myself and then to speak a few words from a number of other people who either aren't here or don't have the guts to get up here, because it does take a little bit. Most of you know her life, but you don't know how she was born. So I want you to take you back to why does this happen? February 22nd, 1929. And the man who built the house that she was born in is in the cellar, in the root cellar, which is where he spent a lot of his time whenever his kids were being born. And the root cellar was right below the bedroom. Oh, thank you. And so my mother was born, and back then doctors weren't there, just had midwives, which were mostly just aunties. And so she was born, and my grandmother, Myrtle Weir Dexter, screamed and yelled, popped the kid out, and the kid, Joyce Mary Dexter, was put in a cardboard box and put in behind the wood stove in the kitchen. That's what served as an incubator back then, because she was very, very small. But she grew up to be a big person in a lot of our lives. I promised myself I wouldn't do this, but I guess I'm not good at keeping promises like that. Here are some memories that, excuse me, here are some memories that I have of her. I have, in many respects, I have two kinds of memories of what I call Mama. The first is that as a former teacher, Mama valued education and instilled in us the desire to see education as a lifelong pursuit that would open up new doors and provide deeper insight into ourselves and the world around us. She was also very academically competitive, and I don't know if you could think of Grandma or Joyce or Mama or Grandma or whatever as competitive. But back in high school, she was competitive. And in fact, in grade 12, she got the highest grades. And when the teacher announced that, the girl who came in second started crying. And my mother felt really bad for her, but not that bad. When I was in grade 11, I remember, so I'm trying to give you a picture here. Back then, when I was in grade 11, that was a few years ago, we had party lines. How many people know what a party line is? Yes, you have to be over 50, I think, to know what a party line is. So we had a telephone on the wall, we had a party line, and you picked it up, and if somebody else was talking, you just hung up. Or if you were really sneaky, you could let the receiver up really slowly, and then you could listen into the conversations that the other party was having. But at any rate, I was talking to a friend on the phone, and the kitchen was right around the corner from where the phone was. And I was telling my friend, you know, I think I'm going to do really well this year. I'm going to get like over 90% in all of my subjects. And my mother starts chanting, 100, 100, 100, which was endearing, but also really pointed out that she didn't think I was thinking big enough. And, you know, as I reflect on a lot of these things, I really come to understand that those influences seep into you as a child, and they form your character, and you only realize that years later. The second sort of memory I have of her is embodied in this photograph. In the last decade of her life, she enjoyed the simple pleasure of sitting in the sun and watching the traffic and the people go by on 3rd Avenue. Kind of the hustle and bustle of the city, but also talking, and we talked a lot. And I always sat with her because she was an old lady. And in the later years, I didn't want her wandering off somewhere. Our conversations actually ranged all over the place. I mean, literally, we talked about cosmological theories. We talked about physics. We talked about space travel, anything that was in the news. We didn't talk about Trump much anyways. And we certainly talked a lot about something she was an expert in, which was Ernest Shackleton. And she knew enough that she could have given academic lectures on it. So thanks for all the memories. I'm going to try and read something from Sebastian without getting all choked up. He says, the thing I remember most fondly about my grandmother Joyce isn't any one particular moment, but rather how it felt to be around her. The way she welcomed people into her home with love and care. Anytime someone spoke to her, they could tell that she had a genuine interest in knowing all that she could about them. And those tidbits of their life stuck in her head like a steel trap. She would ask you about something you had mentioned to her months or even years earlier. And if you know her, you know that the kind of memory she had was incredible. It never failed to make people feel special, and that amazing memory stuck with her until her final days. Well, you're right about almost all of that, Sebastian. I only hope, and this is his words as well, I only hope mine does the same so I can carry fond memories of her the way she did of others. This is from my daughter, Rebecca, who lives in Australia now and has been for the last 11 years. It's actually from Rebecca and from Phil, her partner. One thing I always admired about my grandma was her impeccable memory. She could recall details and dates and names as far back as her childhood for a very long time. It was always so interesting to sit and listen to her talk about all the sorts of things from her life. It was like a glimpse into history. Grandma was one of the kindest and sweetest people. She really cherished her whole family and extended family. And I am really glad I got to spend what time I could with her throughout my life. You're missed, Grandma. I thought 5 weeks would dull this a little bit, but love, Becca and Phil. And the next one I have is from Brenda. And Valerie here is her sister. And Brenda and my mother talked on the phone a lot over the past. Brenda moved to Nova Scotia about 5 years ago, I guess, 5, 6 years ago. And she really valued talking to my mother on the phone. So this is what she wrote. I have Does anybody have a Kleenex? My eyes are bad and tears don't make it any better. I have many fond memories of Mom. She called her Mom. She was my mother-in-law, but much more than that. From the very first time I met her 42 years ago, she was a friend and a strong, caring person in my life. She helped me in a lot of ways. She was a good-hearted and peace-loving person. When our children, she was married to Jonathan at the time, and I would visit her, we would often go walking the paths and the beaches by her home, having picnics there or just having a great time together. She was a fun person to be with and a very positive and optimistic person. As the grandmother of our children, she always loved them. She believed in them, always treated them kindly, was proud of them, and always wished them well. I'm sure she was the same with all of her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren. She had gone through harsh difficulties and terrible tragedies, which took a toll on her. She was strong, though, and she was very understanding, empathetic, and helpful to others going through difficulties. I was in awe of her fantastic memory. It's a theme here. And I should tell you, as she went downhill and I had a better memory than her, I knew things were really going bad for her because I don't have a good memory. I admired her strength. She was a good person. She helped me through some rough times in my life. She was a special person to me. I am thankful for her presence and her loving influence in my life, my children's lives, and in the lives of many others. I will miss her very much, and I'm sure everyone else who knew her will miss her a lot as well. My mother lived in the building that she lived in on 3rd Avenue. I kept saying it was 35 years. When I pulled out her initial lease agreement, it was July 1st, 38 years ago. So she lived there for a long time and she knew all the comings and goings in the building. What I want to read to you is from Rio. Rio Deline is one of the two people who live up in the front of the building. And she titles it The Yard of Possibility with Joyce and Rodney. Since I moved into the apartment building that I shared with Joyce, Rodney, and 12 other tenants 15 years ago, we have all shared the big front yard. Joyce and Rodney were always a part of the landscape on sunny days. Joyce held a deep appreciation for nature and the warmth of the sun and the beauty of the ocean, which seemed to originate from her time in the Maritimes. The yard provided a sanctuary for tenants, relatives, children, and grandchildren to visit, bask in the sun, enjoy conversation, love, and good times together. This is a tribute to Joyce, her life and legacy, her happiness, smile, childlike wonder and curiosity, love of nature, and deep kindness. Joyce always reminded us to return to a place of gratitude, where the possibility of peace and joy, and then she puts in brackets, Joyce means joy, is always available to us. Thank you, Joyce. And thank you, Rio. And before I pass it over to some other people, my mother talked a lot on the phone, and these weren't 5-minute conversations. They were hour and a half, 2 hours sometimes. And her brother Noel passed away in January of this year. And she would talk to Noel at least a couple times a week for at least an hour at a time. And I know what the conversations were mostly about because I had to put it on speakerphone because she couldn't hear a lot of the time, so I would have to be talking to Noel about what she said. So I got to listen into a lot of conversations. She also had another friend, she's gone, but Bertha is not. Bertha Barkhouse in Nova Scotia. She and Bertha would talk a lot every few weeks for a couple of hours. And Bertha says, "Our sincere sympathy to you and your siblings in the great loss of your dear mother. It is our loss too. I so appreciate the wonderful phone calls we both enjoyed. I will be lost without her voice calling to me." And then the card is signed by about 10 people. Bertha and her brother James and Sadie, her sister, and just a whole bunch of other people, some of who I've probably never met. But she touched a lot of people's lives. And I know my mother never said this explicitly, but she did over the years say how much she appreciated Fran and Jerry. And how they took all 4 of Allison's kids when she passed away. And so thank you. There's a few other people who have said that they want to speak. And so the first one I'd like to invite up is Allie, my daughter. One of my daughters.
I just wanted to say a few words. I really had a great privilege of spending a lot of time with Grandma in her apartment, a place she always made me feel at home. And I'll miss her kindness, her quietness, her generosity, her smile, her stories, and her strength. I found a letter that she wrote me in 1998 when we still lived in California, and I feel like it really shows the kindness that we all knew. And it says, "Dear Alex, it's not your birthday yet, but since Rebecca and Sebastian have birthdays this month, I thought I'd give you something too. Your mom can take it to the bank and get a little less, and then you can buy something for yourself. Have a wonderful Easter with your brother and sister and friends. I'll be thinking of you. You are growing into a beautiful young lady. Lots of love, Grandma." I'm really grateful that I've got to sit next to her for 20 plus years in her apartment, and especially in the last few years where I got to hold her hand a lot of the time, give her hugs and say I love you. Every time I left her apartment over the last 20 plus years, I would always look up and she'd be looking out her big picture window, and she would give me a smile and she would always wave goodbye. And recently after she passed, I was over at her apartment with my dad, and I looked up and he was standing there waving goodbye to me. And that was a very beautiful moment for me. And I'll always cherish the image I have of her smiling and waving at me. And I'm just very grateful she got to see several places I've lived. She got to see me through grad school and the start of my career. And I could tell she was proud of me and my partner, Sam, who, a little funny anecdote is, her vision was not great, but my boyfriend has very long hair. And we were in her apartment once, and she said, "Who's that lovely lady over there?" So she knew how to offer kindness and to make people smile and to laugh. And she knew a lot about our family history, including my mom's family history, some of which my mom had forgotten. So I'm grateful for the history that she's given to me, and I'll cherish that along with just all of the moments I've gotten to spend with her. So I will miss her greatly. Thank you.
My notes say we have 3 more people, 2 which will come up in a pair. But first I want to invite Stefan up. Stefan is her oldest grandchild.
As my Uncle Rodney says, it does take guts, and I thought to myself, the moment that I step up here, I will no longer be facing him and the other people that were speaking, and I would now be facing the room, which actually, in all honesty, it's not actually that bad, because I've spoken to a lot of people. But I left this perhaps longer than I should to put things together, partly because I'm scatterbrained. I have too many children. Not that that's a bad thing, but I have too many children. Sometimes I think of that way. But I wanted to let some of the thoughts roll out organically and not go on for too long. So I most of this I address to her in some ways, so that I'm speaking to her. I'm speaking to all of you. Grandma, so here we are. We knew this point would come one day, but now that it's here, my thoughts are still scattered. So much to say, but how to say it? When I look back very, very distantly, a little closer, so much closer, final years, final day, final moments I had with her. I recollect memories. I form memories, and I put some of them out today. Some happy, some ironic, some humorous, some serious, some bittersweet. I could fill this whole time with much preparation, with all of my thoughts that I could share and my words, but she all of you, many people out there, know that brevity and concision is not my strength. I was actually spoken to before. But, so, I started with a few visuals. The visuals of the apartment, because I think that brings me back to what I think of. I think of a few things where you lived longer. The apartment, now that I remember the day, July 1st, 1986. Yes, she lived there longer than I was alive. That's pretty something. I've never lived in one place more than, well, I've lived in some places of in my childhood longer, but I've moved around a lot, and she stayed in that place a very long time. The longevity is very impressive. So we come to the steep hill on our Beautison Third with the colorful awning, the steel rail, the smell of old apartment, the creaking old door to go in, the creaking old door to go into the apartment, the pictures, the couch against the wall, the view to the beach. The picture window is a perfect way to describe it. And I will lead to some things that you remembered. You remembered the songs that I played on the piano during my first years. I forgot completely how to play them, but she asked me, do you remember how to play that aria song? And I don't even remember the song, how it sounds. So her memory is a common theme. She always referred to me as the first grandchild, just by a bit. There's a few that came right after, but I got that honor, and I don't really want to lord it over anyone, but it is something that's somewhat of a joke in my mind, and always a funny thing to think of. She was always the first to comment on my birthday on Facebook. It's typically also because she jumped the gun by about 6 hours or so usually. One thing to look at now, thinking about this, is it was sad when her health started to fail and I didn't get the message from her anymore on Facebook. I do remember how she told me how I kept getting taller. She also added, it's perhaps I'm getting shorter. And those are her words. I'm not calling her short. I remember the paper mache hot air balloon. I think I made it. I actually can't remember if I made it. I think I made it. I saw in the pictures. I still don't remember if I made it. And I wanted to put some other thoughts. These are a little more serious in their nature. I regret that you didn't let me to meet my newest children, my 10-month-old twin boys, Lincoln and Isaac. I deliberated and tried to find the ways to have them come out to see you. And I meandered, and it never came. I didn't bring them to see you in your last day. I didn't think it would be appropriate. I mentioned them to you, and I believe that you heard me. My daughter Alice, who is now 3.5, she did get to meet you, and I'm very happy for that. And I saw photos up on the screen, and it brought all that back. When I visited you, and I got to finally made the time to do so. And I spoke to you. I believe that you heard me as well. And what really struck me is when I found out the next morning that you were gone, just like that. If I deliberated a little bit longer, then you would have been gone. And that is a regret I don't carry. But some regrets also that I'm not able to put all the words that I like to put out. I have put out some of what I would like, and I think it's pretty happy enough what I've said. So lastly, I'm going to turn the page here. Also to notice, Grandma, you were part of the glue, for lack of a better word, that kept all our family together. Tragedy struck that has been mentioned. You kept all 4 children of us together through some of your efforts, combined with the efforts of others. You kept us together, and I will tell you, we have stayed together in some capacity or another. We have had our ups and downs. We all stuck together. We're all here. I'm so very happy that you stayed with us for all the time that you did. Grandma, I love you, and I will miss you, and I always will remember you.
I think we're going to have our first and only duo to come up and talk, Fran and Kelsey. And I'm going to put this way down here because they're both short.
Perfect. Family, letters, birthdays, email, Nova Scotia, Russian, cyborg. Those are a few of the words that come to mind when I think of my grandma. I'll explain those last two for sure. Grandma was amazingly family-oriented. Let's see if I can get these numbers right. She was one of 10 children. She went on to have 6 children herself. She had at least 12 grandchildren and at least, I'll last count, 10 great-grandchildren. Yes, I had to consult family trees to make sure I got those right. But Grandma would not have needed a tree. No, sir. No one had a sharper memory than Grandma to keep up. Ask her about anyone, and she would easily rattle off a dozen details about them, including their birthday, current whereabouts, and relationship status. And then throw in a speculative question or two about what was next for them. Even with the advent of Facebook and helpful birthday reminders, you could always count on Grandma to send a thoughtful birthday message the day before your birthday. Something that helped Grandma keep track of all those wayward family members was her commitment to letter writing. For years, Grandma was a tremendous letter and postcard writer. As far back as I can remember, and certainly decades before that, she would exchange letters with many of her siblings back in Nova Scotia. She greatly looked forward to each reply when it came a few weeks later in the mail. Although I think her world was quite rocked when she finally upgraded to a computer and was introduced to the speed of email. But I know I, for one, loved getting handwritten letters and cards from Grandma each summer in the mail and hearing what she was getting up to during her Nova Scotia visits. Each one finished with her usual sign-off. God bless you, Grandma. In her later years, Grandma remained full of surprises. As she was getting older, she knew she wanted to stay sharp. With the might of the internet behind her and her lifelong love of learning, she decided to pick up some Russian. Yes, you heard that, right. And yes, my grandma was just that cool. Speaking of cool, Grandma could stay current with the best of them. As I'm sure most of you remember, a number of years ago, Grandma had a fall and needed surgery on her leg. One day in casual conversation, Grandma mentions that thanks to the metal pins placed in her leg, she's now a cyborg. I was very impressed that she knew the reference. Well played, Grandma. Very well played. Of course, aging is difficult, especially towards the end. When I married Dave, my husband, back in 2018, it was very important to me that Grandma be at the wedding. On the day of, she wore a lovely blue dress and, due to increasing mobility issues, a pair of shockingly sturdy, bright pink runners. She later confessed to me that she was self-conscious of the shoes and wished they weren't so obnoxious. Grandma, we loved those shoes. I loved those shoes. You rocked those colors and wore them with grace and style. We loved them because we love you, and I'm so thankful I have those pictures of the two of us on such a special day. Pink runners and all. Now, whenever I think of you, I will think of you wearing those pink runners and smile. God bless you, Grandma. We love you and we miss you. I met Grandma Joyce when she was going through a very difficult time in her life when she lost her daughter, Allison. She was trying, with the help of her sons and friends, to keep Allison's family together.
And I remember meeting her for the first time and seeing before me what seemed like a very small woman, and I'm pretty small myself, but what shone through was her strength, her determination, and her resilience. I immediately liked and admired her. We shared a lot of the same values about family, and it was easy to incorporate her into our family. And I just remember all the family dinners and the holidays, and how she shared all of the children's milestones of graduations and weddings and birth of her great-grandchildren. One of my best memories is when she was in Nova Scotia for the summer, and we all traveled as a family to go there too, and we met her siblings, and she was so proud to show us her home where she was born and raised and where she got married. And that trip was full of good memories. She embraced all of our children as her own grandchildren and enjoyed many occasions with our large family. She enjoyed watching all the grandchildren grow into adults, and some even having some of their own. And I think the youngest great-granddaughter, Ruby Joyce, named after Joyce, has her smile. And yeah, I see Joyce in Ruby Joyce.
I don't want to turn this into an open mic because that may promote people to come up, and I'm sure there's a few of us like me who are hungry. But is there anybody else who would like to say a few words? Okay, with that, I'll turn it back over.
I have to say, well done, all of you that shared. There's some great memories, and there's lots of them. And so it's, as you share them and the emotion that comes in those, that's an okay thing. And I know many try to get up here and not be emotional, but you know what? That's okay. That's what this is about, the opportunity to grieve together. One of the other hymns that Joyce wanted us to sing was Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah. So we're going to let this play. And again, if you want to sing the words, feel free to do that. But otherwise, you can just meditate on the words and think about her faith journey and some of the things that she's walked through. As we heard, not all of it was easy and a lot of it was hard. But this is for her something that brought great comfort. And so the words, may they bring us comfort as well.
Till I want no more.
the last part of that song, I know from what you've shared that that's Joyce's cry, that I would want to be with thee. I actually have a lot in common with this family, more than I thought, actually. Joyce and I share the same birthday, February 22nd. Now, it might be 38 years later, but that's okay. It's a birthday. Also, my mom would be 95 this year. And although she didn't get to experience the last 20 years of her life, it is interesting to experience. And I often think, what would my mom have thought about the experiences of her life? The opportunities that she had. Now, we grew up very poor as well. I remember those boxes of food that would come from a church or some organization. I don't know who they thought they were feeding. As a little boy, I don't know how many cans of sardines I would normally eat, but everybody would put sardines in the box, and we would always get everybody's food that they didn't want. And so we got to try some very unique things. I can't say I love Spam. I never did, but I sure ate a lot of it. And yet my mom did what she could. She did the best she could. And she made the best out of a really hard situation. And Joyce did the same thing. She made the best out of hard situations. And so we shared that poverty. We shared my mom grew up through the Great Depression as well. And again, that saying that you had, they didn't know they were poor. That's exactly what it was like. I asked my mom, what was it like? You know, you're like a textbook, and like we never thought about it. We just lived our life, and that was what it was. And that was a very unique and interesting thing. The struggle to make ends meet, the loss of children, the working extremely hard and trying to get your family through challenging times. But today I was caught with something else. I was caught by the fact that there's a verse in the Bible that said, "Blessed are those whose children rise up and call their mother blessed." That is what you did. As you shared those stories and as you shared the experiences, there's lots that you could have maximized and spent time in. But those are experiences, and we walk through them and we do the things that we can. And I think the testimony and the legacy of Joyce is very clearly evident in all here. Life is not easy. It can sometimes slap us in the face. It can knock us down. But you know what? It's the things that you do in response to that. You wipe it off, you get back up, you press in, and you persevere. That's what she taught us. And that's the legacy that we get to continue to live on. Because life is not going to get easier. And we may have had it easier than she did, but there are always things that will come up. How are we going to respond? How are we going to get back up onto our feet again? And Joyce had the greatest of treasure. She may not have had it monetarily in the beginning, but she had it with family. She had it with friends, and she had it in her faith. And those three things are what got her through. Those are the three things that helped her to celebrate life and to live it to the fullest. I have done hundreds of services. And there are times when I do services for people who have died very young. And there are times when I have done services. This is probably the third oldest person I've done a service for. And it's not about how long you live or how short you live your life. It's about how you live, how full it is. And I've seen people who have lived their life 18 years old and lived a full life. But I've also seen people that have lived their lives into their 80s and into their 90s, and there's just lots missing. And they may have lived a long life, but it may not have seemed as full. So when I stand here and I say Joyce lived a long and full life, that is what she did. She lived it well. And she took what was challenging and hard and she made the best of it. And as you've stood up here and shared the things that she taught you, those are great memories. You get to take those with you. Nothing will ever take those away. And this will be a hard year as you go through the firsts of everything, the first of, the special celebration or a birthday or something. And those moments where you would have expected a phone call or a card, they're not going to be there. And you will miss her a lot. And that's okay. She's lived her life so that we can miss her and because there's so much to miss. So my prayer for you as we conclude our time together is to just continue to be there for one another. Continue to support and continue the stories. They will come and you will remember something. And as somebody said, sometimes it's a song or a smell or an event, and you will just come together and just bring them up, share the stories, celebrate them, because her life is worthy of celebration. Let me pray for us. God, we thank you for our time together today. Thank you for this amazing woman who lived such a full and long life. And you have blessed us with many, many years of her speaking into it, whether it be verbally or even just time spent with, or it just be the things that how she lived her life is our good lessons for us. And so I pray, Father, for her family. I pray you would comfort them. And I pray for all of us here that, God, you would just help us as we continue to celebrate her life, especially in this coming year when there's going to be a lot of firsts without her. May we just continue to lift her up, Father, and may we continue to celebrate her. Thank you for her faith. Thank you, God, that in her faith she lived out it because she believed in you and she lived her life for you. And it was not easy, but God, she just really trusted you in that. So thank you for that. And God, as we continue to fellowship together here now, we pray your blessing upon the food we're going to have as well. May you just be honored in all the conversations we have, we ask. In Jesus' name, amen. So we're going to turn it over here now. I believe there's food here, and so help yourself. And there's coffee and tea and refreshments over there as well. So thank you all so much for being here.
Appreciate it.
You did so well. Thank you so much. And you know what? The emotion is a good thing.
Oh, I know.
It's good.
It's hard, but it's a good thing.
It's a good thing. You're right. You're right. Thank you.
Pastor,
You did
thank
so
you.
well. Thank you for all you shared. That was a lot.
Yeah.
It's like you had that memorized because you were just flipping pages and.
I inherited a good memory from
Well, that's good. You did.
I did not.
That's great.
Thank you very much.